The thunder cracked like a whip as Rebecca Dawson huddled beneath the broken remains of her family's wagon, her soaked calico dress clinging to her trembling body. The mule that had carried her this far lay dead 20 paces away, struck by lightning not 10 minutes before. She'd come west from Boston with such hope, answering her cousin's invitation to help with a new millinery shop in Redemption Creek, only to be abandoned by her frightened guide when the storm turned violent. "Just wait here, Miss Dawson," he'd said, mounting his nervous horse. "I'll be back with help." That was hours ago, before the creek had swollen to twice its size, before the lightning had spooked her mule, before the darkness had swallowed everything but fear. Rebecca wiped rainwater from her eyes and pulled her carpetbag closer. Inside were her life's possessions: a photograph of her deceased parents, $50 sewn into the lining, and letters from her cousin Martha describing the opportunities that awaited in the Montana Territory. Now, in June of 1882, those opportunities seemed as distant as the stars hidden behind storm clouds. The wagon's broken axle had left her stranded in this desolate stretch between nowhere and nothing. Another flash of lightning illuminated the landscape, revealing a cluster of distant trees bending in the wind like old men before a firing squad. The rain fell in sheets, pounding against her makeshift shelter. "Lord Almighty," Rebecca whispered, her teeth chattering. "If this is to be my end, please make it quick." As if in response, a sound rose above the storm, not thunder, but the steady drumming of hooves against mud. Rebecca pressed herself further beneath the wagon, uncertain if approaching riders meant salvation or a new kind of danger. Tales of bandits and renegades filled every newspaper east of the Mississippi. The rider approached slowly, horse snorting against the wind. A lantern swung from his saddle horn, its glow revealing the silhouette of a tall man on a dark horse. "Hello," came a deep voice. "Anybody there?" Rebecca remained silent, fear holding her voice captive. "I saw the wagon from the ridge," the man called. "If anyone's alive, now's the time to speak up." Rebecca swallowed hard. Death by storm or death by stranger, neither seemed a pleasant choice. But the cold had seeped into her bones, and she knew she wouldn't survive the night without help. "Here," she finally called, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I'm here." The lantern light swept across the ground until it found her huddled form. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as boots hit mud. He approached cautiously, holding the lantern higher. "Madam, you hurt?" Rebecca blinked against the light. "Not hurt, just cold. And afraid." The lantern lowered, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, a man perhaps 30 years of age with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of a Montana sky. He wore a long duster, soaked through and plastered to broad shoulders. "Name's Owen James," he said, crouching to peer under the wagon. "Most folks call me OJ. Ranch is about 4 miles west. Can you stand?" Rebecca nodded, though she wasn't entirely certain. Her limbs felt distant, disconnected from her mind's commands. She attempted to crawl from beneath the wagon, but her sodden skirts tangled around her legs. Without hesitation, Owen reached beneath the wagon and gently pulled her free. His hands were calloused but careful, and Rebecca found herself leaning into his solid frame. "What's your name, madam?" he asked, steadying her as she struggled to stand. "Rebecca Dawson. I was traveling to Redemption Creek to meet my cousin." Owen nodded, assessing the broken wagon and dead mule with a quick glance. "Martha's cousin from back east? Heard she was expecting you." He turned back to Rebecca. "Nothing worth salvaging here tonight. We need to get you warm." Rebecca tried to protest when he began removing his duster. "You'll freeze." "I'm accustomed to it," he replied, draping the heavy coat around her shoulders. It smelled of leather, tobacco, and horses' strangely comforting scents in that moment of desperation. "My horse can carry double. We'll come back for your things tomorrow." "My carpet bag," Rebecca insisted, pointing. "Please." Owen retrieved it without question, securing it to his saddle before turning back to her. The rain had plastered her auburn hair to her face and neck, and despite the duster, she couldn't stop shivering. "Permission to carry you, Miss Dawson? You're in no condition to ride astride." Under normal circumstances, Rebecca would have found such a suggestion scandalously forward. But these were not normal circumstances. She nodded, and in one smooth motion, Owen swept her into his arms. She was tall for a woman, but he lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. The horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, stood patiently as Owen settled Rebecca in the saddle before mounting behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a protective circle that felt safer than any Rebecca had known since her father's death 3 years prior. "Lean back against me," Owen instructed as they began moving. "Body heat's the best we've got until we reach the ranch." Rebecca hesitated only momentarily before settling against his chest. Through his wet shirt, she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, a counterpoint to the chaotic rhythm of the storm. They rode in silence for a time, the horse picking its way carefully through the darkness. The rain continued its assault, but beneath the wide brim of Owen's hat, Rebecca's face remained relatively dry. "How did you find me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Wasn't looking for you specifically," Owen replied, his voice rumbling against her back. "Storm caught me returning from town. Saw the lightning strike something near the creek. Came to investigate. Good thing I did." Rebecca closed her eyes, imagining what might have been her fate had he not appeared. Yes, a very good thing. The journey seemed both endless and too brief. Rebecca drifted between consciousness and something deeper, lulled by the rocking motion of the horse and the warmth of the man behind her. Only when the landscape changed from open prairie to fenced pasture did she fully rouse. A large structure loomed ahead, a 2-story ranch house with a broad front porch. Light glowed from several windows, a beacon in the darkness. As they approached, the front door swung open, and a woman with silver-streaked hair stepped onto the porch, lantern in hand. "OJ, that you?" "It's me, Rose," Owen called back. "And I've brought a guest. Martha's cousin from Boston. Found her stranded out by Willow Creek." The woman Rose hurried down the steps, unmindful of the rain. "Lord have mercy. Bring her inside, quick." Owen dismounted first, then carefully lifted Rebecca from the saddle. Her limbs felt leaden, unresponsive. As he carried her toward the house, she felt herself slipping further into that gray space between waking and unconsciousness. "You're safe now," Owen said softly as they crossed the threshold into warmth and light. Those were the last words Rebecca heard before darkness claimed her completely. When Rebecca opened her eyes, sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains. She lay in a feather bed, covered with a colorful quilt, wearing a nightgown that wasn't her own. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memories of the storm, the broken wagon, and the cowboy named Owen James flooded back. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of the silver-haired woman from the night before. She carried a tray with a steaming cup and a plate of something that smelled deliciously of cinnamon. "Ah, you're awake," the woman said, smiling warmly. "I'm Rose James, Owen's aunt. How are you feeling, dear?" Rebecca pushed herself to sitting position, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. "Better than I should, Mrs. James. Thank you for your hospitality." "Rose, please," the older woman insisted, setting the tray across Rebecca's lap. "And it's not hospitality when it's a matter of life and death. You were near frozen when Owen brought you in. Doc Jenkins says you're lucky not to have pneumonia." Rebecca looked down at the unfamiliar nightgown. "A doctor examined me?" Rose patted her hand reassuringly. "I tended to you personally, dear. Doc just listened to your breathing this morning before he left. Said you need rest and plenty of hot food." She gestured to the tray, starting with my cinnamon rolls and coffee. Rebecca's stomach growled audibly, prompting a chuckle from Rose. "How long have I been here?" she asked between bites of the most delicious pastry she'd ever tasted. "Just the night. It's nearly noon now. Your things are drying by the fire downstairs. Owen rode out at dawn to retrieve what he could from your wagon." The mention of Owen brought warmth to Rebecca's cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "He saved my life." Rose's eyes crinkled with affection. "That's OJ. Always been one to ride toward trouble instead of away from it. Ever since my brother, his father, passed on, he's taken the weight of the whole county on those shoulders." Rebecca savored another bite of the cinnamon roll, trying to reconcile the strong, silent man from the storm with this description of a community caretaker. "He mentioned he has a ranch. This is at the Cross, J. 3,000 acres and the finest cattle herd in the territory. Built it up from nearly nothing after the war." Rose straightened the quilt. Now you rest. Once you're feeling stronger, we'll figure out how to get word to your cousin that you're safe." After Rose departed, Rebecca sank back against the pillows, mind racing. She'd heard tales of the West, its dangers and opportunities, but never expected to experience both so quickly upon her arrival. She wondered what her cousin Martha would think when she learned of Rebecca's dramatic rescue. Martha had written of Redemption Creek's need for a proper millinery shop, suggesting that Rebecca's skill with needle and thread could find profitable employment there. After the death of both parents and the loss of their modest Boston home, Rebecca had seized the opportunity for a fresh start. Now, in the aftermath of near disaster, she wondered if the journey had been foolish. She'd spent nearly everything she had on the stagecoach ticket and provisions. If her supplies were ruined in the storm. A commotion downstairs interrupted her troubled thoughts. Heavy footsteps on the stairs were followed by a gentle knock. "Come in," Rebecca called, hastily checking that she was properly covered. The door opened to reveal Owen, hat in hand, his tall frame nearly filling the doorway. Without the rain and darkness obscuring her vision, Rebecca could now fully appreciate his appearance. Sun-bronzed skin stretched over high cheekbones, and those remarkable blue eyes regarded her with concern beneath straight brows. His dark hair, still damp, curled slightly against his neck. "Miss Dawson," he said with a slight nod. "Good to see you awake." "Mr. James." Rebecca smoothed the quilt nervously. "I haven't properly thanked you for saving my life." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "No need for thanks. Any decent person would have done the same. Perhaps, but it was you who found me, not any hypothetical decent person." Rebecca's directness surprised even herself. "I'm grateful." Owen shifted his weight, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I managed to salvage your carpetbag and trunk. The wagon's beyond repair, I'm afraid, and the mule." He trailed off. "I understand," Rebecca said softly. "I'm fortunate that my most important possessions were protected in the carpetbag." Owen nodded. "I've sent word to your cousin in Redemption Creek. The roads are washed out, so it may be a few days before travel's possible." The prospect of several days' convalescence in the home of strangers, however kind, made Rebecca uneasy. "I wouldn't wish to impose upon your hospitality any longer than necessary, Mr. James." "It's no imposition." His voice was firm. "Winter's harsh enough out here without good folks turning away those in need." He paused, then added more softly, "Besides, Aunt Rose enjoys the company. Place has been too quiet since my uncle passed." Before Rebecca could respond, Rose appeared in the doorway. "OJ, stop hovering over the poor girl and let her rest. You can talk her ear off at supper if Doc says she's well enough to come downstairs." A flush crept up Owen's neck. "Yes, madam." He settled his hat back on his head with a nod to Rebecca. "Miss Dawson." After he departed, Rose lingered, a knowing look in her eyes. "That boy hasn't carried a woman across our threshold since." "Well, never mind. Ancient history now." She busied herself straightening items on the dresser. "Rest up, dear. I've laid out one of my niece's old dresses for you to wear when you're ready." By evening, Rebecca felt strong enough to venture downstairs, dressed in a borrowed blue calico that was slightly too large but freshly pressed. She found the James household to be surprisingly comfortable, a blend of practical frontier furnishings and touches of Eastern refinement. Books lined shelves in the sitting room, and a piano stood in the corner. Owen rose when she entered the dining room, pulling out a chair for her with old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. He'd cleaned up as well, his dark hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt with his trail-worn denims. "You're looking better," he observed as she took her seat. "Thanks to your aunt's care," Rebecca replied. "And yours." Rose bustled in from the kitchen carrying a tureen of fragrant stew. "Sit, both of you. No standing on ceremony here." The meal progressed with Rose carrying most of the conversation, asking polite questions about Rebecca's life in Boston and sharing stories of the ranch's history. Rebecca learned that the Cross J had been established by Owen's father, a Union cavalry officer who'd headed west after the war. Owen had taken over at 22 when his father died of a fever. 10 years he's been running this place, Rose said proudly. Turned down marriage proposals from half the eligible girls in the county to do it. "Aunt Rose," Owen warned, a flush creeping up his neck. Rose waved him off. "It's true. Caroline Porter practically threw herself at you last Christmas, and Widow Jenkins makes those pies for you special." Rebecca hid her smile behind her napkin as Owen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Miss Dawson isn't interested in my non-existent courtships," he muttered. "On the contrary," Rebecca said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I find it interesting that a successful rancher such as yourself has remained unmarried." Owen's blue eyes met hers across the table. "Marriage requires time and attention. The ranch demands both." "Yet your father managed," Rebecca observed. A shadow crossed Owen's face. "My father had my mother. I haven't found." He paused. "Most women aren't suited to ranch life." Rose snorted. "What he means is he hasn't found a woman willing to put up with his stubbornness." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Rebecca found herself studying Owen when he wasn't looking. Beneath his reserved manner lay something she recognized, the same solitude she had felt since her parents' deaths. She wondered what had shaped him into this man who would risk himself to save a stranger, but keep everyone at arm's length. After dinner, despite Rose's protests that she should rest, Rebecca insisted on helping clear the table. As she carried plates to the kitchen, she overheard Owen speaking with his aunt in low tones. "Should reach Martha by tomorrow. Assuming the creek's gone down, we can take Rebecca to town in 3 days." "No rush," Rose replied. "Girl needs time to recover. Besides, having a pretty face around does you good." "Aunt Rose." Owen's voice carried a warning. "I'm just saying what everyone can see. You've been alone too long, OJ." Rebecca retreated, not wanting to eavesdrop further. The prospect of leaving in 3 days left her with mixed feelings. Practical considerations demanded she continue to Redemption Creek and the security of her cousin's home, but something about Cross J Ranch and its owner called to her in ways she couldn't articulate. The following days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Rebecca's strength returned quickly, and she insisted on making herself useful. She mended torn shirts, helped Rose with cooking, and even ventured outside to gather eggs from the henhouse. The vastness of the Montana landscape took her breath away, rolling hills stretching toward distant mountains, the sky an endless blue canvas overhead. On her second afternoon, she sat on the front porch, working on a tear in one of Owen's shirts, when the man himself rode into the yard. He'd been checking fence lines since dawn, and dust clung to his clothing and hat. When he spotted her, he dismounted and approached, leading his horse. "Should you be outside?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Rebecca smiled. "The fresh air is the best medicine. Your aunt agrees." Owen nodded, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Looks like the creek's receding. Roads to town should be passable by tomorrow." "Oh." Rebecca tried to mask her disappointment. "That's good news." Owen studied her face. "Unless you need more time to recover. I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition." His response came quickly, almost eagerly. Then, more measured. "Aunt Rose enjoys the company." Rebecca looked down at the shirt in her lap. "And you, Mr. James? Do you find my presence burdensome?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Owen shifted, his eyes moving to the distant horizon before returning to her face. "No," he finally said. "I don't find your presence burdensome at all." Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders approached the ranch house, dust rising behind them. Owen's posture changed instantly, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "Stay here," he instructed, handing his horse's reins to Rebecca. She watched as he strode to meet the riders, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. The lead rider, a thin man with a drooping mustache, dismounted first, followed by his companions. Their conversation was too distant for Rebecca to hear clearly, but the body language spoke volumes. The mustached man gestured animatedly while Owen stood solid as stone, shaking his head occasionally. After several minutes, the men remounted and rode away, casting backward glances that made Rebecca shiver despite the warm afternoon sun. When Owen returned to the porch, his expression was grave. "Is everything all right?" Rebecca asked. That was Elias Thornton and his boys. Owen took his horse's reins from her. They owned the Double T Ranch to the north. "Been trying to buy me out for years." "What?" Owen's jaw tightened. "Water rights. The best creek in the county runs through Cross J land. Thornton claims he needs it for his cattle, but he's already dammed up 2 other creeks. nearly ruined the Hopkins place downstream. Rebecca considered this. And he won't take no for an answer? Not so far. Owen's gaze drifted to where the riders had disappeared. Lately, he's gotten more persistent. Losing cattle, finding fences cut. Can't prove it's him, but... You suspect, Rebecca finished for him. Owen nodded. Let's not dwell on it. Supper should be nearly ready, and you shouldn't be concerning yourself with ranch troubles. That evening, over Rose's beef stew and fresh biscuits, the conversation remained light, though Rebecca noticed Owen's attention frequently turning toward the windows as darkness fell. After the meal, he excused himself to check on the horses, leaving Rebecca and Rose alone by the fire. He's worried about something, Rebecca observed, setting aside her mending. Rose sighed. That Thornton business. Been going on for 2 years now, getting worse all the time. She looked toward the door Owen had exited through. He carries too much alone, that boy. Always has, since his father died. No siblings. A younger brother, Daniel, killed in a stampede 5 years ago. Rose's weathered hands smoothed her apron. OJ blamed himself, though there was nothing he could have done. Since then, he's kept everyone at a distance. Rebecca's heart ached at the revelation. That's a heavy burden to bear alone. Yes, well, that's OJ stubborn as his father and twice as proud. Thinks asking for help is a weakness. Rose fixed Rebecca with a penetrating gaze. You know, in the 3 days you've been here, I've seen him smile more than in the past 3 months. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm sure you're mistaken. I'm old, not blind, Rose countered with a chuckle. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching reminds me of how his father looked at his mother. Before Rebecca could formulate a response, the door opened, and Owen returned, bringing with him the scent of night air and horses. His eyes found Rebecca immediately, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Everything secure? Rose asked innocently. Owen nodded. For now. He settled into the chair opposite Rebecca, stretching his long legs toward the fire. I've been thinking about tomorrow. The roads to Redemption Creek should be passable, but... He hesitated. But... Rebecca prompted when he didn't continue. But I'm not entirely comfortable with Thornton's men being so active in the area. If you'd prefer to wait another day or two until things settle. Rose made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. What OJ means is he'd prefer you stay a bit longer, dear. Aunt Rose, Owen admonished, but there was no real irritation in his voice. He turned to Rebecca. The decision is yours, of course. I just want to ensure your safety. Rebecca considered his words, weighing practical concerns against the strange pull she felt toward this place and this man. Perhaps one more day would be prudent, she said carefully. If it's truly no imposition. The relief in Owen's eyes was unmistakable. None whatsoever. That night, Rebecca lay awake long after the household had fallen silent, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the pines outside her window, the occasional creak of the house settling. Her thoughts kept returning to Owen, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, to the gentle strength in his hands when he'd carried her through the storm. She was being foolish, she knew. In a few days, she would continue to Redemption Creek, to her cousin's home and the future they'd planned. Owen James would remain here, tending his ranch and fighting his battles with Elias Thornton. Their paths had crossed by chance, nothing more. Yet something deep within her questioned whether it truly was chance that had brought her to Cross J Ranch, or something more like destiny. Morning dawned clear and warm, the storm's devastation already fading as nature healed itself. Rebecca dressed in her own clothes, now cleaned and pressed by Rose's careful hands, and ventured downstairs to find the house empty save for a note on the kitchen table. Gone to help with calving at Peterson's. Back by noon. Breakfast keeping warm in the oven. Rebecca had just finished the eggs and biscuits Rose had left when the sound of hoofbeats drew her to the window. Instead of Owen or Rose returning, she saw 3 riders approaching Thornton and his men from the previous day. Uncertainty gripped her. Should she hide? Pretend no one was home? But before she could decide, the men had dismounted and were approaching the porch. A sharp knock followed. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca opened the door partway. May I help you, gentlemen? Thornton removed his hat, revealing thinning hair slicked with oil. Madam, we're looking for James. Mr. James isn't here at present. I expect him later. The men exchanged glances. And you are? Thornton asked, his small eyes narrowing. A guest of the family, Rebecca replied, keeping her tone even. I'll tell Mr. James you called. She began to close the door, but Thornton's boot inserted itself in the gap. No rush, madam. We can wait. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps inside? It's mighty warm today. Alarm bells rang in Rebecca's mind. She remembered Owen's concerns from the previous day, the cut fences, the missing cattle. I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate, Mr. Thornton. If you'd like to leave a message, you know my name. Thornton's smile vanished. James been talking about me, has he? Rebecca realized her mistake too late. Please remove your foot from the doorway, sir. One of Thornton's companions, a burly man with a pockmarked face, stepped forward. Let's just have a look around, boss. James has been mighty protective of this place lately. Rebecca's heart pounded as Thornton considered this suggestion. I really must insist that you leave, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Thornton's expression hardened. Listen here, miss. This isn't Boston or New York. Out here, when a man wants something, he takes it. He pushed the door further open. We'll just have a quick look, then be on our way. Rebecca backed away as the three men entered the house. Fear mingled with indignation in her chest. This is trespassing. Mr. James will what? Thornton interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. By the time he returns, we'll be gone. And if we happen to find something interesting while we're here? He shrugged. Call it compensation for wasted time. As the men began rifling through drawers and cabinets, Rebecca's fear gave way to anger. This was Owen's home, his sanctuary, and these men were violating it as casually as they might swat a fly. Her eyes fell on the shotgun mounted above the fireplace. Rose had mentioned it was kept loaded just in case. Moving casually toward it, Rebecca spoke to keep their attention elsewhere. What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Thornton? He glanced at her, distracted by a stack of papers he'd found. Deed to the water rights. James has been claiming he has some special arrangement with the territory. Rebecca edged closer to the fireplace. And if you find these papers, what then? Thornton's smile was cold. Then maybe there's an accident. Old houses like this catch fire so easily. The casualness with which he spoke of destruction chilled Rebecca's blood. She reached for the shotgun, but the pockmarked man turned at that exact moment, spotting her movement. Boss, he warned, lunging toward Rebecca. She grabbed the weapon and backed away, raising it with trembling hands. Stop right there. The men froze, exchanging glances. Thornton slowly raised his hands. Now, miss, let's not be hasty. Get out, Rebecca demanded, the shotgun heavy in her grip. All of you. Now. Thornton's eyes narrowed. You won't shoot. Rebecca steadied her aim. My father taught me to handle firearms before I could write my name, Mr. Thornton. I assure you, at this distance, I cannot miss. A tense silence filled the room. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression resolute. Finally, Thornton nodded to his men. We're leaving. He pointed a bony finger at Rebecca. But this isn't over. Tell James I'll be back, and next time, the sound of approaching horses interrupted his threat. Relief flooded through Rebecca as she recognized Owen's distinctive whistle to his mount. Thornton cursed. Out the back, he ordered his men. Rebecca kept the shotgun trained on them until they'd exited through the kitchen door. Only when she heard them mounting up and riding away did she lower the weapon, her arms shaking with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. The front door burst open moments later, Owen rushing in with his revolver drawn. He surveyed the disarray of the room before his eyes found Rebecca, still holding the shotgun. Rebecca, he crossed to her in 3 long strides. Are you hurt? She shook her head, finally allowing the weapon to be taken from her trembling hands. Thornton and his men. They were looking for water rights documents. They threatened to burn the house. Owen's expression darkened with fury. Did they touch you? No. I'm fine. Just. She gestured to the ransacked room. I'm sorry I couldn't stop them from doing this. Owen set the shotgun aside and, to Rebecca's surprise, pulled her into a fierce embrace. The house can be put right. If anything had happened to you. Rebecca melted into his embrace, the solid warmth of him chasing away the last of her fear. I managed to frighten them off with the shotgun before they found anything. Owen drew back slightly, looking down at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. You held Thornton and his men at bay with Aunt Rose's shotgun? A small, slightly hysterical laugh escaped Rebecca. It seemed the sensible thing to do at the time. Something shifted in Owen's gaze. Respect, certainly, but also something deeper, more profound. His hand came up to gently touch her cheek. You are. Not what I expected, Rebecca Dawson. The intimacy of the moment, of his touch and the use of her given name, made Rebecca's breath catch. What did you expect, Mr. James? Owen, he corrected softly. After facing down Thornton with a shotgun, I think you've earned the right to use my given name. Owen, she repeated, liking the way it felt on her lips. His eyes dropped to her mouth, and for a breathless moment, Rebecca thought he might kiss her. Then, a sound from the kitchen had him stepping back, his hand dropping to his side. Rose bustled in, stopping short at the sight of the disrupted room. What in heaven's name? Thornton, Owen explained, his voice tight. Looking for the water rights papers. Rose's eyes widened as she looked between them. Are you both all right? Thanks to Rebecca, Owen said. She held them off with your shotgun until I returned. Pride and concern battled in Rose's expression. Well, it seems you found yourself a woman of substance after all, OJ. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication, but Owen didn't contradict his aunt. Instead, he began setting the room to rights, his movements deliberate, controlled. This changes things, he said after a moment. Thornton's escalating. It's not safe for either of you here right now. Rose planted her hands on her hips. This is my home, OJ. I'm not running from that snake, Thornton. I'm not suggesting running, Owen clarified. But perhaps a visit to your sister and Helena wouldn't be amiss. Just until I sort this out. Rose looked ready to argue, but something in Owen's expression stopped her. And Rebecca? Owen turned to her, his eyes serious. I think it's time I took you to your cousin in Redemption Creek. Today, despite knowing this moment would come, Rebecca felt a pang of disappointment. Of course, that would be sensible. Owen held her gaze a moment longer before turning back to Rose. Pack a bag, Aunt Rose. I'll hitch up the buckboard and take you both to town. Within the hour, the house was locked up, the animals tended, and the three of them were on the road to Redemption Creek. Rebecca sat beside Owen on the wagon seat, Rose behind them with their luggage. The journey passed mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they crested the final hill, Redemption Creek came into view, a modest settlement nestled in a valley, with a main street of wooden buildings and smaller homes scattered around them. Rebecca's cousin Martha owned the general store, where she'd set aside the rooms upstairs for her millinery business and living quarters. The wagon pulled up in front of the general store, and before they could disembark, a plump woman with graying red hair burst through the doors. Rebecca! Oh, thank heavens! Martha rushed forward as Owen helped Rebecca down from the wagon. When your stage never arrived, I feared the worst. Rebecca embraced her cousin warmly. I'm afraid I had quite an adventure getting here. Martha stepped back, noticing Owen for the first time. Owen James, don't tell me you're the one who found her. Owen nodded, hat in hand. Yes, madam. During the storm 3 nights ago. Martha looked between them, her expression speculative. Well, Providence works in mysterious ways. She turned to Rose. And Rose James, what brings you to town? While Rose explained the situation with Thornton, Rebecca became aware of Owen watching her, his blue eyes intent. When their gazes met, he didn't look away. Miss Dawson, he said quietly, might I have a word? They stepped away from the others, moving to the shade of an awning. Owen seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, turning his hat in his hands. I want to thank you, he finally said, for your courage today. It was nothing, Rebecca demurred. It wasn't nothing. His voice was firm. Most people would have hidden or given Thornton what he wanted. You defended my home as if it were your own. Rebecca looked up at him, searching his face. It felt like something worth defending. A long moment passed between them, filled with unspoken words. Then, Owen took a breath. I have to go back and deal with Thornton. It's been brewing too long, and after today. He trailed off. But when it's settled, when it's safe, I'd like to call on you properly. If that would be acceptable. Joy bloomed in Rebecca's chest, warm and bright as sunrise. I would like that very much, Owen. His smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and worry. Then I have something worth fighting for, too. Before Rebecca could respond, they were interrupted by Martha calling her name. The moment broke, but the promise in Owen's eyes remained. As he prepared to leave, loading Rose's bags onto the stagecoach that would take her to Helena, Owen paused beside Rebecca one final time. "You'll be safe here," he said softly, his eyes holding a promise. "And I'll return as soon as I can." Rebecca nodded, unable to voice the emotions swelling within her. With a tip of his hat, Owen helped Rose into the stagecoach, then mounted his horse and rode out of town, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Martha joined Rebecca as she watched him go. "Well, cousin, it seems you've made quite an impression on the most eligible bachelor in the territory." Rebecca smiled. "It seems the territory has made quite an impression on me as well." 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Rebecca threw herself into establishing Martha's millinery shop, creating displays, and working on custom hat designs for the ladies of Redemption Creek. But her thoughts constantly strayed to Cross J Ranch and its owner. News trickled in the territorial marshal had been summoned. Thornton and his men had been arrested for trespassing and threatening arson. Owen was working to formalize his water rights with the territorial authorities. Then, one clear morning, as Rebecca arranged ribbons in the shop window, the bell above the door jingled. She turned to find Owen standing there, hat in hand, looking travel-worn but triumphant. "It's done," he said simply. "Thornton's been charged, and the water rights are legally documented. Cross J is secure." Rebecca moved toward him, heart pounding. "And you? Are you well?" "Better than well," Owen replied, his voice low and intent. "I've had time to think about what matters most." He took a step closer. "Rebecca, I know we've known each other only briefly, but when I found you in that storm, when I carried you home and told you that you were safe, I didn't realize I was also finding the piece of myself that had been missing since my brother died." Rebecca's breath caught. "Owen, I'm not a man of fancy words," he continued, "but I know what I feel. These past weeks, my house has been standing, but it hasn't been a home without you in it." Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes. "Are you asking me something, Owen James?" He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that lit his entire face. "I'm asking if you might consider making Cross J your home. As my wife." Joy bubbled up within Rebecca, spilling over in a radiant smile. "I believe I started considering it the moment you found me in that storm." Owen closed the distance between them, gathering her in his arms with reverent care. "Is that a yes?" Rebecca looked up at the man who had carried her through the storm, whose strength and gentleness had shown her what true safety felt like. "Yes, Owen. It's a yes." Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, like the end of one journey and the beginning of another, far greater adventure. Outside the shop window, Redemption Creek continued its daily business, unaware that within its walls, two souls had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known. They were searching for a love as vast as the Montana sky and as enduring as the land beneath it.